Welcome and good afternoon, everybody. We have a lovely presenter today, Butet. I hope I'm just spelling your name right.
Very good.
It's Butet is a PhD candidate in anthropology at the University of Amsterdam and currently a visiting PhD researcher at the Australian National University. She is also a co-founder of Sokola, an Indonesian organization that has worked out alongside indigenous and marginalized communities through contextual education for more than 2 decades. The field journals she kept during her earliest years living with the Orang Rimba in Sumatra were later published as a best-selling memoir, The Jungle School, and adapted into an award-winning film. While her work advancing Indigenous education earned her the 2014 Ramon Magsaysay Award, building on this long-term engagement, her doctoral research develops a co-animation as a methodological and epistemological framework for collaborative research. So, Manurang, you have 45 minutes to deliver the speech, and audience will have 45 minutes to ask a question. Online participants can raise their virtual hands so that when we will proceed towards the Q&A, we will just describe more about the Q&A rules and housekeeping. So over to you.
We already checked that they can hear.
Yes. So yeah, over to you, please.
Okay. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the Nganawal and Ngambri country people, the traditional owners of the land and on which we meet today. I pay my respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Thank you. I'd like to begin with the question that has guided this research. How might ethnographic research enable interlocutor to investigate, interpret, and make sense of their own life? This question has stayed with me throughout more than 2 decades of working alongside the Orang Rimba. During those years, I often hosted researchers, students, professors, journalists, and filmmakers. Many came to learn about the Orang Rimba, but gradually I began to wonder whether ethnographic research could enable interlocutors not only to tell their stories, but also to decide what is important to investigate, interpret, and make sense within their own ways of knowing. At the time, I had no idea how to do that, but I thought this is something that anthropology should have has responsibility for. Today, I'd like to share where that questions led me. This presentation focuses primarily on one chapter of my dissertation, where I developed the concept what I call co-animation, as a methodological and epistemological framework for collaborative ethnography, while briefly drawing on other chapters to provide the broader context from which co-animation emerged. Most of this research took place here in Jambi Province, Sumatra, within Bukit 12 National Park. The park is surrounded by 26 villages where indigenous communities, settler plantations, conservation agency, NGOs, and the state meet on a daily basis. Most of this research took place in Makakal Hulu, one of the Orang Rimba territories within Bukit 12 National Park in Jambi, Sumatra. The area became the main site of my long-term ethnographic engagement. The Orang Rimba are an indigenous forest-dwelling community living semi-nomadically in the rainforest of Sumatra. Traditionally, they practice melangun, means relocating for months after the death of community member, before eventually returning. And they follow a matrilocal residence system, in which a husband joins his wife's family after marriage. This photograph tells the story of two interconnected worlds. Here is the relationship with the forest on the top, and here is beyond on the bottom, the relationship with the wider world. Is it me?
Someone online keeps unmuting their mic.
Today, however, their life is being reshaped by the deforestation, conservation policies, schooling, plantations, roads, and market integration. Many young orang rimba now find themselves navigating this rapidly changing landscape with an inherited map that no longer fully matches the terrain. This photograph was taken in 2006 when I was teaching this boy, Nyung Sang Bungo. He was about 9 years old at the time. The second photograph was taken in 2023, so 17 years later, with a group of children, some of whom are now Bungo's children. Although I told everyone that I had returned this time as a researcher, and although they all said they understood what research meant, Bungo still asked his children to wake me up every morning so that I could teach them how to read. That moment reminded me that despite my changing roles as a teacher, as an activist, and now an anthropologist, the expectation people placed on me had not changed. In many ways, that was where this research really began. For whom? I began working with the Orang Rimba in 1999 through a conservation NGO. In 2003, I resigned together with close friends and colleagues. I co-founded Sokola Institute. Over the years, our work expanded to communities across Indonesia and gradually received increasing public recognition, national and international. Each time I received an award, people often congratulated me for my work with the Orang Rimba. Yet I found myself becoming increasingly uncomfortable. If the forest continued to disappear, if Orang Rimba rights remain fragile, what exactly was being recognized? I found myself asking questions again, who benefit from this recognition? From this PhD. So rather than being successful, I increasingly felt that I was the one who had gained the most from them. Success should be measured by when Orang Rimba are able to exercise their rights, maintain their relationship with the forest, and choose the lives they want to live. Those questions became the beginning of a long methodological experimentation even until now. Sorry. From multimodal experimentation to co-animation. Those questions also made me rethink how I conducted research. I gradually realized that many of the questions people asked and many of the answers they gave were shaped by who I was, their teacher, an activist, and a longtime friend. At the same time, I realized that I could not fully understand their lives through my own interpretation alone. I wanted my understanding to be shaped by the Orang Rimba's own ways of knowing. As they investigated, interpreted, and made sense of their own lives through the research process. Together with my research assistant, Alberta, I began experimenting with a range of multimodal approaches, including interviews, participant observation, drawing, photo voice, life history, pantun, the traditional verse, journaling, theater, and later the Ambung game, which eventually led us to stop motion animation. These methods were not simply ways of collecting more diverse data. They were experiments in creating different kinds of conversation, spaces where experience and our question, our reflection could emerge that might not surface in direct conversation with me if I just depend on interviews alone. That methodological search gradually led me to what I call later co-animation. What is co-animation? Co-animation is a collaborative methodological and epistemological process through which researchers and interlocutors investigate and interpret and make sense life experience lived experience, and possible futures through creative storytelling and self-reflection. I use the term animation in its original Latin sense. Anima means to give life. What is animated in co-animation here is not simply image, but the whole process of inquiry itself. Building on earlier multimodal experimentation, I brought a number of themes and questions into the next phase of research. Inspired by Camila Morelli's collaborative work in the Amazon, I adapted stop-motion animation as one way of practicing co-animation. Filmmaking itself was not new to the Orang Rimba youth. Long before this project, they had already produced digital maps and documentary films, one of which received an award at an amateur documentary films festival in Melbourne. What was new was not the technology, but the use of stop motion as a collaborative space for storytelling. Stop motion is a simple filmmaking technique in which still photographs are sequenced to create the illusion of movement. Almost anything can become animated, a stone talking to each other, a leaf, a drawing, or paper figure. What mattered was not the film itself, but rather the collaborative process of storytelling that make filmmaking possible. Okay, now I want to play with this. So frog trick, they call it keluarga beretung. Beretung means frog. So this simple stop motion animation created by Orang Rimba themselves shows how they trick frogs by mimicking their calls before catching them. It is the kind of knowledge that is difficult to convey through writing alone. The animation demonstrates how sound is central to the Orang Rimba ways of learning and hunting. By imitating the frog's call and listening for their replies, they locate the frogs in the forest and catch them. Frog calls different between the day and night. So the Orang Rimba always mimic the appropriate call depending on the time. Guided by this sound, they move quietly through the forest and finally catch them. This stop motion voiced by 3 Orang Rimba youth, and like lessons, it teaches them timing, dialogue, and attentive listening and coexistence.
Aku nyama na masuk iba katong nyama aku nanyo tigay ko aku nyama lat kakon. Akin ba masuk ano akin mako ng hulo. Akin man tu iba katong
Oh, I want to tell you something. So these animations themselves are full of imperfection. In this scene, after finally catching the frogs, the creator realized they forgot the ambung basket. Remember, during the day they have the ambung basket. So rather than redoing the sequence, he simply stuffed all the frogs into his loincloths. Instead, it's illogical. Orang Rimba will never do that, put frogs in their loincloths, right? But yeah, they did it rather than have to redo everything again.
ya sila no beli teka ko no bumasok pula ngo kumalomon.
Yeah. So watching this animation made me realize that becoming Orang Rimba is not only about learning to move through the forest by reading vegetation, recognizing footprints, and orienting oneself using cardinal direction. It also involves learning through other senses, humidity, smell, and especially sound. This animation revealed an Orang Rimba way of learning that would have been difficult for me to grasp through interviews or writing alone. This is the behind the scene. Before showing these films themselves, I want to briefly show what the process looked like. What you see here is not simply people making animation. It is a process of discussing stories, testing ideas, making characters, changing scenes, recording voices, laughing, disagreeing, and reflecting together. This is where co-animation becomes visible to me. So not as a final film, but a shared process of inquiry. So this is the whole process of leading to co-animation.
Yang pengen ibu guru. Kalau dulu ini paling penting ini.
Kalau di luar, Bapak setuju karena memang kita
Dulunya kalau orang napasnya memang
polari ya.
bagus. Kini ya.
Ini hasil apa tadi? Sawit.
Belum ini
Pasar ya, tapi jajan.
Kali ini lado ibu guru.
Lado ya,
Iya.
cepat tuh.
mati satu, Wang Meru mati berdua. Belajar baca tulis, oke. Belajar mempertahankan berburu atau mencari yang di hutan, oke. Ceritanya lama tahu.
Yoi, bukan yoi. Yang paling menjadi perdebatan sekarang itu apa?
Misalnya Yoya Bono mengajoko anak-anak
Ambil orang satu. Baru kawan.
Ya, balang. Kena uangku.
Tante. Oh, ya. Oh, masuk motor. Yuk, balang siapa?
Apa?
Kopi tentu.
ah boleh.
Aja pai beda lah cewek. Orang berarti pakoy. Dua-dua.
Mana lah beli?
Ibu kan.
Aku
Iya,
dulu.
Tapi dia tetap mau menerap kok ada terima.
Masuk ke kamar beliau cukup 7 malamnya buka mesenak yoi mai intan suaso ision. Jadi jahat orang itu. Masih betul mulun anak.
Bikin apa?
Yang terbalik.
Kawan siapapun juga apa lah.
Hati-hati belakang kamu kamera.
Biasanya di bawah.
Dari pengawalan siapa sih?
Kok kulitnya jadi diwarna juga?
Bukan kulit itu banyak mana? Kami mengucapkan selamat Hari Masyarakat Internasional. Kami mengucapkan selamat Hari Masyarakat Internasional.
Sedaya sedang berani.
Oh, kemarin aku nguli setirit cuci baju pakai sunlight. Bapak nih mau dia mah belanjanya.
Aku PU.
tahu. Nanti.
Ôi Quyên, tu pôi bọc mày ku juga. Kulancok. Oh, ana. Kana. Akiladai, maka masuk, mai makan lo. Ôi. 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 Ôi.
Dan berpesan sesuatu itu boleh dibuka ketika sudah 7 hari 7 malam.
Nah, jadi pause dulu Ibu Guru. Jadi tadi ada bentuk tulisan kami tulis kertas, baru kami potong-potong, nanti kami susun sesuai bacaannya, huruf dan butuh kok, untuk mengucapkan Hari Masyarakat Adat. Kami pembuatannya. Jadi kalau Mika lihat tadi ada tupoi de lanco, ada deronya, padahal nak deronya apa? Krayon.
Ini ya umpamanya ada nih kayak lagi ketakutan dengan orang baru.
Nak ngagalkan apa? Hijau gak ada bulir mengadon itu.
Dia ajo nyelok lahu.
Gimana ajonya?
Dia ajo nyelok lahu dari sari-sari sampai pasir, barunya pembeli lahu. Asalnya perubahan. Senang kami kalau boleh lo, mono ipom Tuhan, nyom Tuhan, lo aku boleh kemono mikai mau nyempuknya apa anggo budak di janton, apa anggo budak di Cina.
Aku induk dengan ya, aku punya aku jalan jam.
Tapi kalau orangnya agak tidak peduli, walaupun nikah di dalam tetap tidak diurus juga.
Karena sekuti bungsu merawat anaknya dengan baik tanpa ada kendala apapun hingga beberapa tahun.
That's the behind the scenes. Sorry, there is no subtitle yet. Still working on it. Okay, co-animation in practice. Co-animation unfolded through repeated cycles of creative storytelling, conversation, screening, reflection, and collective interpretation. And this is supposedly in order, but in reality is not in order. The process supposedly rarely linear or in classic order. For example, I discovered that storyboards were often of little use, considered they are oral tradition community. So participants continuously shape and reshape their stories by acting them out first, improvising dialogue, revising scenes, and negotiating ideas until they were ready to record the final voices for the animation. Some groups developed the story before making the animation, while others created the animation first and only later developed the dialogue. Oh, sorry. So menjadi means becoming. In orang rimba is similar but not quite fully the same. So becoming in co-animation. So this is some of I will show like several film after this, but this is just 3 out of 20 animation that they made. But I picked 3 as showing how they show the becoming at the moment by the youth orang rimba. If we watch this stop motion, the changes or the transformation of the environment that often people, including me, describe as something as pessimistic, sort of gloomy situation. Outsiders often interpret these transformations through narratives of dispossession and decline, as if it is a total tragedy. This stop motion that the youth created foregrounds something else, the everyday ways people continue to find joy, opportunity, and meaning amidst changes. So they call it perubahan, but I named this Orang Rimba and the Tide of Change.
Dahulu orang rimba hidup berumah betanom. Nah, ini adalah rumah betanomnya. Dia pulang dari berburu. Nah, setelah itu dia memanen padinya. Nah, ada desakan dari perusahaan dan akhirnya muncullah sawit. Nah, akhirnya mereka tinggallah di sawit dan hidup berondol.
Ayo berondol gue, ayo berondol.
Nah, akhirnya mereka menjual hasil berondol dia dan membeli minuman seperti Panter, Power.
Enaknya.
If you understand, Indonesia knows Power F and Panther. It's energy drink. Brondol is picking up split fruit from the palm oil.
No.
So they're picking up just the split one. So they think energy drink.
And the remaining.
Yeah, the remaining. So yeah, the reject, and they can sell it per kilo for cheaper price. So the film reminds us that while researchers often focus on structural transformations, the people living through them may narrate these same changes through aspiration and pleasures, an everyday experience that do not fit neatly into stories of either loss or progress. So sometimes I found it, I'm glad I did this, because if I explain this, it will be a story about loss. But they just story about, finally we can try energy drink because they have money. Okay. The next one is berburu. Berburu means hunting, and but I name it game for sale. Hunting is central to Orang Rimba life. Eating freshly hunted game is considered one of the greatest luxuries. The distribution of meat also carries important social meaning. Specific part of the animal must be shared with particular families or what they call a sempu. For deer, for example, sempu kepalo or head portion and sempu punggung back portion will go to important people. For example, mother-in-law or brother-in-law. And the hati tunjuk, or the deer's heart, or the flesh beneath the tongue must be eaten by the hunter himself to avoid bad curse. Today, however, large game such as deer and wild boar are increasingly sold for cash. It is no longer uncommon for a hunter to return home carrying money instead of meat. This transformation from hunter to trader is explored in this stop-motion animation that Nengkabau and I created together. Unfortunately, this doesn't have yet English subtitles.
Pak Besikot sedang berjalan di hutan, lalu memasang jokon. Seekor babi lewat dan masuk ke dalam jokon. Oh, ladainya awak abule baby. Payu awak bawa ke rumah. Upek mono induk me, kole juga kami abule baby.
Au, ladai.
Kucing lah hidup awak makan lo.
Apa gue?
Maro awak hebi berapi.
Tasi bimakon.
Nio nek mikai sempua. Nio ma induk bepena.
So this when they share the sempu, the meat to certain
sempu
people.
punggung nek kawana
Give this to my mother, this piece.
Kucing lah hidup.
Gratis, Bo.
Our life is extended because we have meat. And then they show this.
Lah 2 hari nyambang beheru akan nuk buli lo.
It's been 2 days now until I get this.
Hopi ada boleh. Tiganya baik hopi bertemu.
Nio duit tak induk besikot hasil
So he
jual
brought
baby.
home money.
Au melawan bepak besi kota mewa beli.
And he said, "Oh, cool! Now I got money." Doesn't show that it's sad. But now they're working at the palm oil to pick up the fruit.
Payu jahat dulu. Kalau au hidup di sawitan Pak Iyoy, au hobi lagi begi sempu.
bagi anak jajan Pak Iyo.
And the mother said, I don't share meat, I take money to go to shopping. I want cigarette, I want sugar, I want this. So that's in the shop, like conversation in the shop. Buy me this, buy me this. So Power F is their favorite one. Only 1,000 rupiah, which is maybe 10 cents. So it's energy drink. Yeah, so at the beginning of my research, like they just starting this, about five kids under 5 years old died in hospital because they drink this, not just one, it's like drinking water. So they just didn't know. Yeah. Yeah, so instead of distributing meat, the characters distribute bottled drinks and other stuff from the shop. This was the filmmaker's way of illustrating how money increasingly replaces meat in everyday exchanges. At the same time, some participants explain that the ethic of sharing itself has not disappeared. It continues, but through different forms. Okay, this is the last film. They call it Betinting and Anissa, but I name it Wife from Afar. So this animation explores another emerging way in which Orang Rimba youths are negotiating contemporary change. Traditionally, Orang Rimba follow a matrilocal residence system in which a husband joins his wife's family. Increasingly, however, some young men are marrying women from neighboring villages who mainly patrilocal system and asking them to live in both in the village and also in the forest. In doing so, they are experimenting with new ways of balancing customary obligation, farming, and increasingly uncertain forest livelihood. Some participants explained that marrying an outsider also offers greater flexibility because village women are not bound by Orang Rimba custom such as melangun, the nomadic practice. The practice of temporary leaving one's home after the death in the extended family. Couples can remain on their land and continue caring for their gardens. In some cases, the wife's relatives are later invited to help cultivate the land, creating new connections between forest and village life. This stop-motion film emerged from conversation among Orang Rimba youth about these changing realities. Rather than presenting a solution, it explores an ongoing negotiation between kinship, livelihood, customary obligation, and possible futures. This has subtitle.
Dek, kapan rencana mau kesininya?
Aduh, nggak tahu nih Bang. Kemungkinan bisanya setelah menikah deh.
Apa kolum? Kawan nelpon siapa podo?
Akan nelpon pacar ke. Kintangun ke Rameru.
Ono kintangun kawana.
Dek, mau kenalan dengan bapakku nggak?
Oh iya, boleh Bang, boleh.
Ini orangnya.
Halo Bapak, salam kenal. Saya Anissa. Saya dari Kota Lamo. Apa kabar Bapak?
Apa jinya tadi kolum?
Nya mungkin apa nanya ko kabar kawan aja nya ado bi apa pi.
Engkau kawan kolum nak berbini dengan orang Meru.
Jadi bepa empat yoi. Ake pindok berbini dorang rimbae. Nguli au ada dan berpenda-penda. Sementara zaman kini ala berubah. Kebutuhan au ala benyok memparang luo. Jadi kalau ake berbini dorang luo, bini ke bisa kubiau ke rimba. Maknya kami bisa menjaga tanaman au
Kalau kawanan nak berbini dulu berbinilah, tapi jangan lupa bini kawana beo beli kemai jago tanaman au.
Let's going to the land.
Permisi.
Ya, sebentar. Bang Betinting. Sudah datang, Bang. Gimana perjalanannya?
Sangat melelahkan sekali, jauh sekali. 18 jam naik mobilnya.
You know, two person make two different character. Someone said, "You make the wife, I make the husband." When they put it together, one is so big. It's like mother and child.
Kasian. Sini bang istirahat dulu.
Jadi begini, Dek. Aku jauh-jauh dari Rimba ke sini ingin ngajak kamu serius buat menikah.
Iya bang, aku juga mau. Tapi kita menikahnya di kota Lamu aja nggak apa-apa kan bang?
Ya, nggak apa-apa, itu serah Dek.
Makasih bang Betinting. Ayo sekarang kita urus persiapan
And then
pernikahan
someone
kita.
else make them.
Stop bang, stop. Udah nyampe di sini.
Makasih bang.
Makasih bang. Ini Dek, kita udah nyampe. Ini kebunku, terus ini rumah, ini yang untuk kita tinggal nanti.
Wah, benar-benar di dalam hutan ya bang?
Iya Dek, memang di hutan. Oh, itu keluargaku. Kenalin Dek, ini bapak, ibuku.
Halo bapak, halo semuanya. Saya Anissa.
Oh iya, halo. Ibu kolom nio betinting kintangon kawan yun ang kandep ko kawan bebini ya.
Au, nio, apa bini ke?
Oh, au kalau lampa iyoy mike tinggal ada rumah nio jagola kebona nguli kami ada dat bependa-penda.
Akhirnya, Betiting dan Anissa hidup bahagia di kebun para di Rimba. So, yeah, what interesting is for me that movie, that film is not just, it might be represented future of Orang Rimba society, but that young people themselves chose this as a story worth telling. Although they were so nervous when we play this in front of the community in the forest, they're afraid of their parents. Because in the movie it says the father is very accommodative. Oh yeah, just bring them. Yeah. But when we play it, the parents are, I will never do that. Oh, I don't do that. Who made this film? And the voice just like this. But they want the story to be screened because they want them to know. So they think by making it fictional, they feel safe. So so the animation become a space in which they could collectively think through fictional all the consequences of changing these marriage practices rather than simply telling their parents about it. So this Nobar, yeah, this is the last all those film we present in the jungle. So total film we created about 20 stop motion animation to be screened, but we make like maybe 40 or 50. But the finish and we think worth it is 20 stop motion. We then brought the films back into the forest and screened them for the wider community using a battery powered projector. The community forum became an important part of co-animation. The films were not treated as final product, but as invitation for further conversation, disagreement, and collective reflection. Some animations, including especially Wife from Afar, spark a lively debate and even controversy. Although fictional, they touch on issues that many young people had already been thinking about, but had rarely discussed it openly. The screenings also become a way of evaluating the research itself. Stories could be challenged, revised, and even remade as new perspective emerge through discussion. So they're thinking if this has a continuation later, like Betinting and Anissa maybe divorce or something happened in the forest, they just add more again. So they have all the properties. The following morning, one elder came to me and said, Ibu Guru, film Yoya Sentaro Bay dengan Hopi, ngoli ake di malam Hopi bisa tidur. Means the film showed an ugly truth. I couldn't sleep after watching it. He explained that the film made him worried about what this changing marriage pattern might mean, not only for Orang Rimba women, but also for the increasing presence of outsiders in the forest, and ultimately for the future of the forest itself. For me, this one of the most meaningful moments of the research. The film did not end with the screening. It continued as a conversation within the community. The dissertation. To conclude, let me briefly situate today's presentation within the broader dissertation. So this is all my chapter and in two parts. First is being and becoming, and the second is reflection. So this presentation mostly on primarily on chapter 6, where I developed the concept of co-animation, but it is part of a larger project. The first part of the dissertation is explore different arena through which orang rimba youth negotiate becoming amid ecological and social change. The second part turns reflexively to collaborative ethnography, developing co-animation as a methodological and epistemological framework for understanding how knowledge can be produced collaboratively through creative practice. A contribution, number one, ethnographic contribution. This is just so this research document how orang rimba youth negotiate possible futures through collaborative storytelling, such as about marriage, hunting, literacy, and collaborative reflection. And number two is methodological contribution. It explores collaborative creative practice as a process of ethnographic inquiry and collective reflection. And number three, which is still in the developing, as conceptual contribution, I developed co-animation as one possible collaborative methodological and epistemological process for ethnography. A conclusion. Co-animation did not simply produce films, it created spaces in which different possibilities of becoming could be explored together, debated, and reflected upon by the community itself. I would particularly welcome your thoughts on those four, the conceptualization of co-animation as methodological and epistemological process, its relationship to collaborative ethnography, areas where the argument could be strengthened, and literature or theoretical conversation that you think would be valuable to engage with. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Fantastic presentation. Moving forward to the Q&A session. You had 45 minutes to deliver, and audience will have online and in the room have 45 minutes to ask any questions, suggestions, and queries. Please raise your hands and make an eye contact so that I can loop you in. Same rules apply for the online participants. Please raise your virtual hand so that I can make you unmute and ask a question. So we are taking our first question from Riza.
Fantastic presentation, and I really love the stop motion